Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that might seem a bit remote at first glance, a presidential executive order. Dense stuff, usually.
Right, full of legal language.
Yeah.
But this one, it has real teeth.
Exactly. We want to translate what this specific order, EO 44175, actually means for global security, maybe even how quickly that package you ordered arrives, and yeah, potentially your household budget.
We're essentially unpacking the machinery of U.S. foreign policy here, looking at how a directive from Washington, turns into deadlines and actual changes, sometimes chaos, thousands of miles away.
It's bureaucratic language hitting the real world.
That's it precisely.
So the document itself is Executive Order 14175. It was signed January 22nd, 2025, and it's all about potentially designating Ansar Allah. Most people know them as the Houthis, as a foreign terrorist organization, an FTO.
And for you listening, understanding this isn't just academic. It connects a conflict in the Middle East directly to things like global shipping, insurance costs, even the stability of supply chains we all rely on.
So knowing what's in this order helps make sense of some big global economic shifts lately.
Absolutely. It's a key piece of that puzzle.
Okay, so our source is the EO itself, published in the Federal Register. Let's unpack it. Our mission is to really nail down why the U.S. government felt this action was needed, the specific reasons they cite.
And just as importantly, what concrete steps, what actions this order actually requires from different government departments. It sets things in motion.
Let's start right there with what it doesn't do, actually, because the fine print matters.
It really does. It's crucial to get this. The EO doesn't immediately slap the FTO label on Ansar Allah. Section 1 is very clear.
Okay.
Its purpose is, and I'm quoting loosely here, to set in motion a process where Ansar Allah will be considered for that designation. It's all done according to the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA.
So it's a preliminary step. But wait, if the government, as we'll see, has this whole list of hostile actions already documented, why the extra step? Why not just designate them straight away? Is there some legal hoop they have to jump through?
That's a really good question. It boils down to, well, legal due diligence and the specific requirements of the law, the INA.
Okay.
The Secretary of State is legally required to formally gather, review, and present the evidence, the intelligence, showing that the group actually meets the specific legal criteria for being an FTO.
Ah, so the president can't just declare it?
Not quite. This EO is basically the president telling the Secretary of State, okay, get the Director of National Intelligence and Treasury involved, do the formal assessment, start the clock ticking according to the law. It makes the whole process legally sound, defensible.
Got it. It's like showing your work in math class, but with major geopolitical consequences.
Exactly, a formal documentation step. And the EO gets right into the background needed for this. It quickly mentions Ansar Allah, taking over most of Yemen's populated areas from the recognized government back in 2014-2015.
Establishes the basic context.
Yes, but what's really interesting is how fast it then links them to outside influence. Right away, the EO points out they're supported by Iran's IRGC Quds Force.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force.
Right, which the document itself says arms and trains terrorist organizations worldwide. So the justification starts by framing this not just as an internal Yemeni issue, but as part of a wider regional dynamic involving state support.
That makes sense. It lays the groundwork legally, showing this isn't just some local group, but one backed by an entity the U.S. already views as a major sponsor of terrorism.
Precisely. That link is foundational for everything that follows in the justification section.
Okay, so let's get into that justification laid out in Section 1. What are the specific actions cited? It seems like they fall into a few buckets.
Yeah, broadly three main areas: direct threats to U.S. personnel, attacks on civilians across the region, and the big word for global impact, disrupting international trade.
Let's start with the U.S. personnel. What does the EO say there?
It's pretty blunt. It states that since 2023, the Houthis have fired at U.S. Navy warships dozens of times. We're talking direct attacks that are, quote, endangering American men and women in uniform.
Okay, that definitely elevates the threat. It's not just regional anymore. It's a direct challenge to the U.S. military.
Right. And then there's the impact on civilians in the region. The EO notes this goes way back to 2014-2015, citing numerous attacks on civilian infrastructure.
Does it give examples?
It does. It mentions repeated attacks on civilian airports in Saudi Arabia specifically.
Okay.
And it also highlights the deadly attacks in the United Arab Emirates back in January 2022. Plus, and this is crucial for the timing, it notes that since October 2023, they launched over 300 missiles and drones towards Israel.
Wow, 300. That shows capability and reach.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a group posing a significant, wide-ranging threat to regional security.
But then there's the part that probably hits closest to home for many people listening, even if they don't follow foreign policy day to day, the economic piece.
This is arguably where the EO connects most directly to, well, everyone. It explicitly talks about the threat to maritime shipping.
What are the specifics there?
The order states, the Houthis have attacked commercial ships, passing through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait more than 100 times.
Over 100 attacks on commercial vessels?
Yes, and tragically, it notes, these attacks have led to the deaths of at least 4 civilian sailors.
That's terrible. But let's really hammer home that inflation connection you mentioned. The EO specifically says the disruption caused by these attacks has contributed to global inflation. How does that work? Can you simplify that link for us? An attack on a ship way over there raises prices here?
Sure. Think of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. It's like a crucial doorway at the southern end of the Red Sea. It leads to the Suez Canal.
Which is that massive shortcut for ships going between Asia and Europe, right?
Exactly. So when you have over 100 attacks happening there, the big shipping companies, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, all of them, they get spooked. They decide it's too risky.
So they stop going that way.
They reroute. They send their ships all the way around to Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope.
That sounds like a huge detour.
It is. It adds thousands of miles to the trip. Weeks, potentially. Which means way more fuel burned, much higher insurance costs for the journey.
Because it's longer and maybe less predictable.
Right. And the ships are tied up for longer, so they can't pick up the next load as quickly. All those extra costs, fuel, insurance, time, they don't just disappear.
They get passed down the chain.
They get passed on to the companies buying the goods, and eventually to you, the consumer. So when the U.S. government puts in writing that this contributes to global inflation, that's the direct mechanism they're talking about.
So if you're managing a household budget, feeling the pinch, this EO is basically saying, yeah, attacks by this group in the Red Sea are officially part of the reason why. That really brings it home.
It absolutely does. And that whole justification threats to U.S. people, regional partners, global trade, that leads directly into the next part of the order. Okay, what are we going to do about it?
Right, the policy and the implementation. Section 3. What's the main goal stated there?
The core policy is pretty clear in Section 2, actually, leading into the implementation. It says the U.S. will cooperate with partners in the region to basically achieve 3 things. 1, eliminate Ansar Allah's ability to operate like this. 2, cut off their resources. And 3, stop the attacks on personnel, partners, and shipping.
Okay, standard counterterrorism goals. But then Section 3 puts the government departments on a tight schedule, right?
A very tight clock. Section 3A kicks things off. It says the Secretary of State, after talking with the Director of National Intelligence and the Treasury Secretary, has to give a formal report to the President about the FTO designation.
And the deadline for that report.
Just 30 days from the date the order was signed.
30 days, that's quick.
And it gets quicker. Section 3B says that just 15 days after submitting that report, the Secretary of State then has to take all appropriate action under the law regarding the designation.
So grand total, 45 days from the EO signing to a decision and potential action.
Essentially, yes. A 45-day window for a decision of this magnitude, involving intelligence reviews and huge geopolitical ripples. That is incredibly fast.
What does that speed tell you?
It signals this is seen as an urgent priority. It likely means a lot of the intelligence groundwork was probably already being done before the EO was even signed. This isn't a leisurely investigation. It's a mandated sprint to a decision point.
That speed really underlines how serious they view the situation. But you mentioned something earlier about the complexity this creates on the ground, especially for aid groups. Where does that come in?
Ah, yes, that's Section 3C, the Aid Review Clause. This part is fascinating because it shows an FTO designation isn't just symbolic. It has immediate, practical consequences for humanitarian work.
How so?
The order requires that if Ansar Allah is designated, the Secretary of State and the head of U.S. aid, the agency handling U.S. foreign aid, have to jointly review every single UN partner, NGO, and contractor they fund or work with in Yemen.
A massive review. What are they looking for?
They're looking for specific things that really highlight the impossible situation aid groups are often in.
Okay.
First, they have to identify any group getting USA money that has made payments to members of Ansar Allah or to government bodies they control.
The idea being to stop U.S. money ending up, even indirectly, with the group being designated.
Exactly. Prevent funds diversion. But the second criterion is where it gets really tricky.
What's that?
They also have to identify aid groups that have, quote, criticized international counter-Ansar Allah efforts while failing to document Ansar Allah's abuses sufficiently.
Wow, that sounds complicated. How does that play out on the ground for an aid worker trying to deliver food or medicine?
Think about it. To operate in areas controlled by the Houthis, which is where most of the population lives, aid groups often have no choice but to interact with the controlling authorities.
Like paying fees or taxes?
Right. Maybe fees for permits, taxes on supplies, even paying utility bills to entities run by Ansar Allah just to keep the lights on at a clinic or a food distribution center. It's often the cost of doing business, the cost of access.
It sounds like paying tolls on a road controlled by the very group you're trying to work around just to get help to people.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So under this EO, if they keep paying those necessary fees to operate, they could be flagged for making payments to Ansar Allah entities.
And risk losing their funding.
But if they stop paying, Ansar Allah might just shut down their operations entirely. Then the aid doesn't get through at all, and people suffer.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Pretty much. And Section 3P makes it clear what happens if groups are flagged in that review. The U.S. Aid Administrator must take all appropriate action to terminate the projects, grants, or contracts. It's not a maybe, it's a mandate.
So this FTO designation process, if it goes through, forces a massive shakeup of the entire aid system in Yemen.
A complete restructuring. Humanitarian groups suddenly face this intense pressure, keep delivering aid, which might require some level of interaction with the de facto authorities, but also strictly avoid any appearance of support and rigorously document abuses, possibly criticizing counter efforts less, all while meeting U.S. counterterrorism rules. It's an incredibly difficult position.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up for you, the listener. Executive Order 14175 isn't the designation itself, but it kicks off the formal process.
Right. It mandates the State Department, DNI, and Treasury to do the legal review needed to potentially designate the Houthis as an FTO.
And the reasons cited are clear. Attacks on U.S. forces, attacks on civilians in the region, and crucially for everyone, disrupting global shipping in a way that contributes to inflation.
And the EO sets a very fast 45-day timeline for a decision. Plus, it includes this complex mandate to review all U.S.-funded aid operations in Yemen, potentially cutting off groups caught in that impossible bind between access and compliance.
It really shows how a decision made in Washington has these far-reaching ripples, affecting everything from military strategy to aid delivery and even, potentially, the price of goods on your local shelves.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with a tricky question to think about, stemming directly from that aid review clause.
What's that?
Well, the EO puts immense pressure on aid groups to document abuses by Ansar Allah and avoid any action that looks like support. But how does that intense scrutiny itself affect their ability to even operate? If pushing too hard on documenting abuses or cutting off minor payments means the controlling faction shuts down all aid access, who ultimately pays the price?
Does the effort to enforce counterterrorism policy end up hindering the humanitarian aid itself?
It's a fundamental challenge.
Yeah.
How do you balance those critical security goals with the immediate life-saving needs of people on the ground? There are no easy answers there. Something to consider.
A really important point to end on. Thanks for breaking that down for us, and thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.